Hi all and welcome to a new video. Today we're going to be going over why Grand Cathay is not as overpowered as it seems, but it still has problems. In the grand overall scheme, the current online discourse is just wrong. Cathay is fine. It's not an overpowered faction that is going to steamroll you every single time. In fact, it is a faction that seems to require pretty high skill expression to get everything going right, especially with the limitations built into them. I think the current online discourse is just wrong about them, but I do think there are one or two things that they have right. So I'm going to start with what I think they have right, and then go into what I think they have wrong. So let's jump into this. Starting with really the only thing I think I agree with the internet on is Mao Ying. Mao Ying is too strong. For 485 points and theoretically 4 pages of rules devoted to her. She is ridiculous and is the strongest, hands down, character in the old world. I don't think anything else even remotely comes close. A fully souped up Chaos Lord on Dragon, which is so annoying to deal with, is not as good as Mao Ying. And Mao Ying also encourages very, very, very high skill expression, especially with all the little teleports and the changing of forms and when best to do that. I personally do not believe I will run Mao Ying that often. If I do run her, it is going to be just with a warning to my opponent so they can build around it. I am assuming that they will be annoying in the competitive scene, but competitive players will probably find a way around it, as you can be countered with pretty much the same thing Dragon Spam counters, so it is what it is. And if I had pronounced her name wrong this entire time, my apologies, I am doing my best. Other than this specific thing, I think a majority of online discourse is wrong, and let's get into some brief overviews. Cathay's range is very, very limited, and I think this is where people get a little confused. Yes, its warriors are good. They're about the same as dwarves, for about the same price, actually. I think they're both 8 points per models. And yes, their lancers are slightly worse than Chaos Knights, but cost way less, but well, mostly because they're slightly worse. They don't have all the benefits of the base Chaos Knight stat line. And they can be shredded pretty easy. The armor save they have can still be countered with some flail wielding marauders for half the price of the Jade Lancers. Like, they have counters. They're not ridiculously overpowered. The Sentinel is balanced at its price point and what it can do. Like, I don't see anything wrong with it reading the rules. It is a slightly more expensive standard monster giant character. It's good. The Sky Lantern is a little egregiously priced. It is very cheap for what it does, but it's also very limited. In the test game I ran, the ridiculously large base it has means that it's kind of hard to maneuver it, especially with the chariot rules. And it is the only source of ranged fire in the entire army, but it's also very easy to take down with ranged fire or just a well placed charge, especially with how far back it flees if it can lose a combat. Like, you just have to do it right. And this probably sounds like me coping, but I don't believe it is. I do believe that Cathay is just not as bad as it seems, and let's get into some more details about each individual unit and what I think its weaknesses are balanced out by what the internet is saying. So, the Shuggengan Lord on the Spirit Longma is ridiculously good for its price point. In fact, I would argue it costs too little. It is also the only way Cathay has access to magic if you're not bringing your fun Dragon Lady. So you're probably going to see two of them on the table most of the time, and for good reason. If not, without Cathay's magic or the ability to spread the buffs some of these spells give, Cathay is not that good. Cathay can really benefit from two Shuggengan Lords, and I don't really think they're that egregiously overpriced. I think the only thing I disagree with is these things should probably have large target. If they were given large target, I think they'd be fine. You can get their saves to be very good. They have the 5-up ward save built in, but they're not going to win a fight against something expressly stronger than them unless dice just immediately scream in your favor. A Chaos Lord on Dragon could take out two of these things, not at the same time, but one after another without too much trouble. If you roll good enough on the Chaos Gods Blessing table, I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head. Or if you hit them with enough cav, like, flail wielding Marauder horsemen, there's a good chance they can also disintegrate. There are counters for it. It's not like Mao Ying where it feels like I have to warn someone to bring this. This is very counterable, and it's balanced out by being the only magic caster in the army. So Cathay's ridiculously strong spell lores, which I would have covered otherwise, are more limited than most people think about. Because at most, you're going to have two models, maybe three, casting these really good spells. And that's easy enough to shut down. You just have to get close enough to be in dispel range or mess with them in some way. And many factions have ways to deal with that. Alright, now on to the hot take of the century. Jade Warriors are perfectly balanced. There is nothing wrong with them. They cost the same as Dwarves, but are slightly worse. But, considering you can buff up their strength and their weapon skill kind of reliably at least once a game, they're costed properly. Weapon skill 5, strength 3, T3 is not as good as it sounds. I also don't know why they have a ballistic skill. I was really hoping this would mean, we're getting crossbow Jade Warriors, but no, not yet at least. Hopefully, pipe dreams. But Jade Warriors are not that bad. They are fine. They are arguably one of the most balanced in this entire army. Like, there is nothing wrong with this stat line. There is nothing wrong with what they do. The rerolling natural ones on armor saves is okay, but you're saving on a 5 or a 6 anyway. So, like, rerolling a 1 into a 5 or a 6 is a statistically low enough chance where you're going to be fine most of the time. Jade Lancers have one problem, and it's that if they win once, they are probably going to keep winning. But sometimes it can be hard to get them to win. Jade Lancers get countered by anything Cav gets countered by. In fact, Jade Lancers get countered by most other types of heavy Cav. They are once again 20 points. Weapon skill 4, strength 3, but it's built in assuming you're going to get buffs off. If the enemy waits until you don't have your weapon skill or your strength toughness buffs, or deny the spell, Jade Lancers are weaker than they seem, especially in the test games I ran. They're not as bad as it sounds. They're not even the best cav in the game. They're not even the best cav in the game for the points price. Like, they are in a spot for sure, but they're not overpowered. They are just a different flavor of heavy cav. Their special rule is very strong. Constantly getting charges and having a weaker version of a lance where you're constantly getting charges is kind of ridiculous. And I agree with that. I think it is a little ridiculous. But from a stat line to points perspective cost, that is the most of what the Jade Lancers are getting out of this. They're not egregiously priced, but I do think they are fairly priced for the limited range Cathay has. Once again, this probably sounds like me shilling or going crazy for Games Workshop, but I'm not. I'm just annoyed at internet's overreaction to stuff, especially after having actually played this army on Tabletop Simulator or Warhol and still not winning and having to actually think. And I don't auto win because all these are better. Because they're not. They are balanced-ish. Now, I think the Grand Cannon should probably be 10 to 20 points higher than it is. Strength 10 is very good, especially compared to the Empire or Dwarf cannons. But other than being 10 or 20 points higher, I think the Grand Cannon is fine. And it's fine in context that I'm expecting the FAQ or errata to do something about Swift Stride. If it does not do anything about Swift Stride, and one of the only Swift Stride impacting things is this Grand Cannon's rule to shut it off, I will be disappointed, and I will put that on record. This video might age horribly. But if Swift Stride gets some form of limitations in that FAQ errata that's coming out soon, then I think this is fine. Probably needs to cost 10 points more, but other than that, it is a fine stat line. The Ogre Loader is one of the best upgrades for this game I have ever seen and is so flavorful and thematic, it is amazing. I will always be taking it. And I feel like that almost makes the gun better. I don't think you should ever use the Ogre Loader to shoot twice unless you think your cannon's gonna die. I think it should always be used to re-roll the artillery dice because I don't know about you. I roll misfire so often. Like, it is not even funny. I roll it all the time. But the Ogre Loader gives you extra strength to your cannons. It means that if they're flanked and hit with something, especially if you do the gunpowder bombs for just 8 points, and it's enough for everyone, that's amazing. Having an entire crew throwing gunpowder bombs before they're charged, perfect. It makes your artillery better considering you don't have as many good options to keep artillery safe with Cathay, because you are going to be running with less units and less mobility than a lot of your peers. Now, here is the big problem child, the Sky Lantern. It is ridiculously good for what it does. And I think in any other army, it would be overpowered or banned immediately. But this is the only source of reliable shooting Cathay has. And it does what it's supposed to do. It's also kind of hard to maneuver. With Fly 8 and the 100 by 100, you're not moving as far as you think you are. And it's hard to judge it, if that makes sense. Now, it has a ridiculous amount of stuff to keep it alive. The fire and flee, etc., etc. But a couple well-placed shots from a cannon will knock this thing down. In fact, it feels like you almost need to have the Lord Magistrate in there for an extra few wounds, or one of the other, like, strategist characters as well. Because those extra couple wounds help a lot. I think where this gets the most egregious, to me, and where I have the biggest complaint about it, is that the Sky Lantern bombs are better than gyrocopter bombs. I do think that the gyrocopter bombs should just become pretty much the Sky Lantern bombs. I don't think Cathay should have better bombing than dwarves who have bombing list things. Like that doesn't make sense to me. It it doesn't make sense. And I think that is where the Sky Lantern gets ridiculous. But this can just be moderated by a rule of 2 or 3. Personally, I think Sky Lanterns, you should not be allowed to take more than 2. Flat out. But 3? 3 is a good limit. And that includes in character mounts. If you have limits on your tournaments that no more than 3 of these can be taken, I don't think it will be as bad as it seems. It will be annoying, but it won't be as bad as it seems. Now, I know people are listening to me and going, you said Mao Ying was the only thing you had wrong with Cathay, but now looking at these stat lines even more, I realize that the Sky Lantern is number 2. Sky Lantern is strong, mostly because of the Sky Lantern crane guns. The Iron Hail guns are good, but because of how close you have to get to make them good and reliable, the Sky Lantern is going to die pretty fast, or get driven off the board, or have something happen to it. The Sky Lantern crane guns, however, having that stat line in a 360 field of fire because you have large target and the firing platform rule because they're a heavy chariot, it's crazy. It is just crazy, and there is no other way to put it than that. It is one of the strongest ways to get hero sniper shooting out, at least if an enemy is bringing a large target hero. And because the Shuggengan Lord doesn't count as large target, Cathay versus Cathay can't take advantage of that. So it is what it is. I don't like that the Sky Lantern crane guns are free. But I also think this can be limited by letting people take fewer of these lanterns. Ending on a negative seems about right. I went through defending Cathay, but discovered a problem at the end while recording. This is a good story. Maybe people on the internet will be less mad at me. Now, I could have gone more into the OP builds you can make with the magic items, and the other crazy stuff Cathay can do. But every single faction in Old World has OP builds you can make with magic items. except Empire players. Any Empire player who wishes to complain in my comments, go for it. I will never judge you. Empire players, I am so sorry. To all other players, though, dwarves have ridiculous things. As a Tomb King main, Tomb Kings have ridiculous things they can do. Warriors of Chaos, Beastmen to an extent. Wood Elves, you're allowed to complain because Orion is almost as expensive as Mao Ying, but other than that, eh. My point being, factions are strong, and things are strong. That doesn't mean you should scream all over the internet that everything is overpowered and strong. That is my opinion. Cathay is not as bad as you thought it was. Have a good night, all, and I'll see you all next week.